The Great Hall of the Galactic Coordination Assembly was filled with representatives from 7 different species. They had gathered for an emergency meeting, and everyone looked worried. The war against the Vrelnith swarm had been going on for 14 years now, and things were getting worse. Every computer simulation, every calculation, every prediction showed the same terrible result. The galaxy would fall. It was just a matter of time. Commander Tae-Yang stood in the center of the hall. He was young by galactic standards, only 34 years old. Most of the alien species around him lived for hundreds of years, so they saw him as barely more than a child. But Tae-Yang represented humanity's colony world of New Busan, and he had come with a plan that he believed could save everyone. The leader of the council was a being called High Arbitrator Kelmoth. It looked like a giant crystal that reflected light in strange patterns. When it spoke, its voice came through translation devices that everyone wore. Kelmoth's words were not encouraging. "Commander Tae-Yang of humanity," the crystalline being said slowly, "we have studied your proposal very carefully. Our military experts have reviewed it.
Our artificial intelligence systems have analyzed it.
Our probability computers have run thousands of simulations." Kelmoth paused, and the light inside its crystal body seemed to dim. "They all agree on one thing. Your plan will fail." Tae-Yang stood perfectly still. His uniform was clean and pressed, even though he had been traveling through space for 70 hours to get here. He did not look surprised by Kelmoth's words. "Your plan depends entirely on hope," Kelmoth continued. "You hope the enemy will make mistakes. You hope your supply lines will hold even though the mathematics say they cannot. You hope that different species will work together even though history shows they always fight among themselves when things get bad." The crystalline being made a sound that the translators called a sigh. "Commander, we have a saying that exists in all 7 of our civilizations. When we translate it to your language, it means this: hope is not a strategy." Tae-Yang took a breath and spoke clearly. "With respect, High Arbitrator, maybe you have been fighting this war the wrong way." The hall exploded with noise. The Korthans, who looked like giant armored bears, roared so loudly that the floor shook. The Velari, who were made of gas and floated in special containers, flickered with angry colors. Everyone was shouting at once. Only one person stayed quiet. Counselor Hei-Wan, the other human representative, watched Tae-Yang with a calm expression that revealed nothing. A military expert named Peltarath raised its massive paw for silence. Peltarath was a Korthan, and it had successfully predicted 17 different battles using complex computer programs. "The mathematics are absolute," Peltarath rumbled in a deep voice. "We have run your Operation Wildfire through 847,000 different simulations. The survival rate is 0.003%. That is 3 successes out of 1 million attempts. Your plan requires perfect coordination across 400 star systems. It requires technology that does not exist yet. It requires the enemy to behave in ways they have never behaved before." "Yes," Tae-Yang said simply. "It does require all of those things." "Then you admit your plan is suicide?" Kelmoth asked. "I admit," Tae-Yang said slowly, "that it requires us to do the impossible. But humanity has a different saying than yours. We say, hope is the strategy when all logical strategies have failed." He pressed a button on his wrist device. Suddenly the hall filled with images and data that floated in the air like ghosts. The images showed Earth, humanity's homeworld, at different times in history. "Before we joined the galactic community, my species lived on just one planet," Tae-Yang explained. "We nearly went extinct 17 different times. Massive volcanoes covered the world in ash. Ice ages froze everything. Asteroids hit our planet. We almost destroyed ourselves with nuclear weapons. Our climate started to collapse." The images changed, showing disasters and desperate struggles. Every single time the mathematics said we would not survive. Every time experts calculated that humanity would disappear. New images appeared. They showed ancient humans crossing frozen lands, scientists working desperately to create vaccines during plagues, engineers building colony ships even though the chances of success were tiny, people celebrating on New Busan when they finally made their dead world come alive with plants and water. Every time, Tae-Yang said, we did survive. Not because the math changed, not because we were lucky, but because we refused to believe that extinction was our only option. We call it desperate innovation. You might call it illogical, but we are still here. Counselor Hei-Wan finally spoke. She was old, 70 years, and her voice carried the weight of long experience. The commander speaks the truth. I was born on Earth during the water wars. The probability computers gave humanity a 12% chance of surviving that century. We gave ourselves 100% determination to prove those computers wrong. Determination is not ammunition, Pelterath growled. It does not stop enemy ships from destroying planets. No, Taeyang agreed. But it does something your simulations cannot measure. It makes people fight when they should give up. It makes them invent new solutions when they should accept their limits. It makes them work together when they should fall apart. He pressed his wrist device again. All the floating images disappeared except for one line of text. It was written in an ancient human language and then translated for everyone to see. The text said, "Hope is a weapon. We are going to teach you how to use it." The hall became very quiet. Nobody knew what to say. Finally, Kelmoth's crystal body pulsed with uncertain colors. "The council will discuss this in private. You have not convinced us, Commander, but you have made us curious. That is something, at least." Guards escorted Taeyang out of the hall. As he left, Counselor Heiwan caught his arm and whispered quickly, "They will reject it. The other species think in terms of certainty and probability. They cannot understand fighting when the numbers say you will lose. Then we will do what we always do," Taeyang whispered back. "We will show them it can be done." 3 days later, the council's decision arrived on Taeyang's communication device. Operation Wildfire was denied. All 7 species voted against it. The official statement said the plan was tactically unsound and strategically irresponsible. They would not support it. They would not allow it. They called it foolish and dangerous. Taeyang sat alone in his quarters and read the rejection message. For 1 minute, he allowed himself to feel despair. 1 minute of accepting that maybe the council was right. Maybe hope was not enough. Maybe humanity was being foolish. Then the minute ended. He opened a secure communication channel that connected him to New Busan and all the other human colony worlds. He began typing a message that would change everything. The message was short. "Operation Wildfire is rejected by the council. We are proceeding with Operation Wildfire anyway. Hope is our strategy. Make it work. Signed, Commander Taeyang." He sent the message and waited. Within hours, responses started coming back. From New Busan, from Earth, from all 127 worlds where humans lived. Ship captains confirmed they were ready. Engineers confirmed they had been building the impossible technology anyway. Soldiers confirmed they were willing to fight even if the odds were terrible. Humanity had been told their plan would not work. They had been told hope was not a strategy. They had been told to accept the inevitable extinction that was coming for everyone. And humanity's response was simple. Watch us anyway. Across human space, preparations began. Ships were loaded with weapons. Crews volunteered for a mission that would probably kill them. Engineers installed technology that only worked half the time in tests. Commanders made plans that violated every rule of military logic. They were going to do the impossible. They were going to turn hope into a weapon. They were going to show the galaxy that mathematics was not destiny. The Galactic Council had 14 years of experience fighting the Vrelnith swarm. They had lost every major battle. They had watched hundreds of species get destroyed. They had calculated that resistance was futile. Humanity had 14 years of experience being told things were impossible, and then doing them anyway. Operation Wildfire was about to begin, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The hangar bay of the CSS Indomitable was controlled chaos. Captain Yun Seo walked through the organized madness, watching maintenance crews swarm over 47 fighter craft like busy insects. Everyone was moving fast, but with purpose. They had to be ready soon, and everyone knew what would happen if they were not. "Captain, we have another problem," Lieutenant Jamin called out. He crawled out from underneath a fighter, his hands black with coolant fluid. "The power cores are running at 140% capacity. I can keep them stable for maybe 6 hours of combat. After that, they will fail catastrophically." 6 hours is 5 hours longer than the council said we would last, Yunseo replied, checking her data tablet. "Mark it as acceptable and move to the next fighter." "Acceptable?" Jamin looked shocked. "Captain, acceptable means these pilots might explode before the enemy even shoots at them." "I know exactly what it means, Lieutenant." Yunseo's voice was firm but not angry. "Every pilot on this ship volunteered. They know the odds. They are not expecting to be safe. They are expecting to have a chance." Across the hangar, Chief Engineer Bo-Ra was directing workers as they installed new equipment. The quantum displacement drives were humanity's latest desperate invention. In theory, they would let ships jump short distances during combat. In practice, they failed 30% of the time during testing. But 30% failure was still 70% success, and that was better than nothing. The Korthans called this weaponized wishful thinking, Bo-Ra muttered to her assistant Do-Yun as they calibrated the drive. They said we were mounting experimental drives onto ships that would be flying suicide missions. What did you tell them? Do-Yun asked. I told them they were absolutely right and we were doing it anyway. Bo-Ra grinned. Besides, weaponized wishful thinking is just a fancy way of saying innovation under pressure. That is humanity's specialty. The Indomitable was just one ship. Across human space, 300 vessels were being prepared for Operation Wildfire. Each one was getting experimental technology, extra ammunition, and crews who had volunteered even though they understood they were probably going to die. The Galactic Council had calculated that assembling such a force would take 18 months at minimum. Humanity had done it in 11 weeks. The secret was simple. When you combine desperation with hope, you got the most powerful motivator in the universe. In the strategy room, Commander Tae-Yang stood before a massive holographic display. Red lines showed where the Vrelnith swarm had spread across the galaxy. Blue markers showed where human fleets were positioned. The plan looked insane. 300 ships would attack 400 star systems at the exact same time, targeting the enemy's central hive clusters while their forces were spread out. The timing has to be perfect, Tae-Yang explained to the fleet commanders who appeared on screens around him. If even one strike force arrives late, the Vrelnith will have time to call back their outer fleets and overwhelm us. Admiral Kyung-Soo, who commanded ships in the Outer Rim, shook his head. His face on the screen looked tired and worried. Coordinating simultaneous jumps across 400 light-years with this level of precision? Commander, the margin for error is less than 3 seconds. One miscalculation and fleets will arrive hours or days apart. Then we will not miscalculate, Tae-Yang replied simply. Commander, with all respect, that is not strategy. That is just hope, Tae-Yang finished. Yes, Admiral, it is hope. But it is hope backed by the best crews in human space, flying ships we built with our own hands, using technology we invented because we refused to accept extinction. He leaned forward, looking directly at the screen. The Council thinks hope is passive. They think it means wishing for good things to happen. They do not understand that for humanity, hope is active. It is something we do, not something we feel. On New Busan, Lieutenant Sojin was working on the most critical element of Operation Wildfire. She was coordinating the communication network that would let all the fleets work together. The quantum-entangled relay stations were another piece of technology that should not work. In testing, they had a 40% chance of catastrophic failure that would leave fleets blind and confused in enemy territory. We are running the final test in 10 minutes, Sojin told her team of 40 technicians. This is our last chance to fix any problems before we go live. And if the test fails? Asked Technician Hyunwoo nervously. Sojin looked at her team. She saw fear on their faces, but also determination. If it fails, we fix it. If we cannot fix it, we launch anyway. Because waiting for perfection means waiting forever, and the Vrelnith are not waiting. The test began. 40 relay stations across human space tried to connect into a single network. The probability computers had predicted a 60% success rate at best. The network achieved 97% synchronization. When the results appeared on the screens, Hyunwoo stared in disbelief. That is impossible. The quantum interference alone should have made this fail. Should have, Sojin said with a fierce smile. But it did not. Do you know why? Because 40 teams of human technicians spent the last 11 weeks refusing to let it fail. We did not just hope for success, we engineered it. As the final preparations reached completion, a message arrived from the Galactic Council. High Arbitrator Kelmoth's crystalline face appeared on Tae-Yang's private communication device. Commander, our intelligence networks have detected your preparations. You are proceeding with Operation Wildfire despite our explicit denial of authorization. Yes, High Arbitrator, Tae-Yang replied calmly. This is reckless. It is illogical. It will result in the destruction of a significant portion of humanity's military assets and potentially thousands of deaths. Probably, Tae-Yang agreed. Then why? Because High Arbitrator doing nothing guarantees extinction. Doing something, even something with terrible odds, gives us a chance. And humanity has learned that a small chance is infinitely better than no chance at all. Kelmoth was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice seemed almost sad. Your species is either brilliantly courageous or catastrophically foolish. We will observe your operation. If you somehow succeed, the Council will reconsider our strategic thinking. If you fail. If we fail, Taeyang said quietly, humanity will have died trying to save the galaxy. We can accept that. The communication ended. Taeyang turned back to his display, watching as the blue markers representing human fleets began moving into position across 400 star systems. Beside each marker was a crew roster with thousands of names. Each name was a person who had volunteered for a mission that the galaxy's greatest military mind said was suicide. Captain Yun Seo, Chief Engineer Bora, Lieutenant Sojin, Admiral Kyung-soo, and thousands more. They were not just hoping for victory, they were making it possible through sheer determination and desperate innovation. In 48 hours, Operation Wildfire would begin, and humanity would prove that hope, when properly weaponized, was the most dangerous strategy in the galaxy. The Council had spent 14 years fighting the Vrelnith with logic and probability. They had lost every major engagement. They had watched species after species get wiped out. They had calculated that defeat was inevitable. Humanity had spent 14 years being told what they could not do, and then doing it anyway. The ships were ready. The crews were ready. The technology was as ready as it would ever be. Everything was held together with determination, innovation, and a stubborn refusal to quit. The Galactic Council had rejected Operation Wildfire because the mathematics said it would fail. They had made their decision based on probability and logic and careful analysis. Humanity had accepted Operation Wildfire because hope said it could work. They had made their decision based on determination and courage and a deep belief that impossible just meant nobody had done it yet. In 48 hours, one of them would be proven right. The betting across human space was not on whether Operation Wildfire would succeed. Everyone knew the odds were terrible. The betting was on whether humanity would prove that terrible odds were not the same as no odds at all. They were about to teach the galaxy a lesson that had taken humanity 200,000 years to learn. Hope was not about believing you would win. Hope was about refusing to accept that you had already lost. And sometimes, just sometimes, that refusal was enough to change everything. The first phase of Operation Wildfire began exactly as the probability computers predicted. It began catastrophically. Fleet Group 7, under Admiral Kyung-soo's command, came out of jump space 17 seconds late. In military terms, 17 seconds was an eternity. The Vrelnith hive cluster at their target location had already been alerted, because Fleet Group 6 had arrived too early. Kyung-soo's ships dropped into space right into a storm of enemy fire. "Shields at 40% and we just got here," Commander Jin-ho shouted from his station on the flagship Resilience. Red warning lights flashed across every surface. "All ships, combat formation, desperate gambit," Kyung-soo ordered. His face was illuminated by the red emergency lighting. We knew this might happen. Execute Contingency Theta. Contingency Theta was a tactic that the Council's war experts had specifically called tactically absurd. It involved ships flying so close together that one explosion would destroy multiple vessels in a chain reaction, but it also allowed their shields to work together, creating a defensive barrier 3 times stronger than normal. The human ships moved closer together, weaving through Vrelnith fire with precision that made their experimental drives scream in protest. 2 destroyers were destroyed in the first 90 seconds. Then the formation solidified and suddenly things changed. "Their targeting systems cannot track us at this range," Jin-ho reported with grim satisfaction. "They are designed for long-range fighting, not close combat." "Then let us get even closer," Kyung-soo growled. "All ships, full speed toward the hive cluster. Launch penetration torpedoes on my mark." Across 400 star systems, similar scenes were playing out. Humanity had accepted that they could not match the Vrelnith in firepower or numbers. Instead, they had committed to tactics that other species considered suicidal: extreme close-range combat, experimental weapons that failed constantly, coordination that required split-second timing and a little bit of luck. Captain Yun Seo piloted her fighter through the chaos around another hive cluster. Her squadron of 20 fighters had been reduced to 13 in the first 5 minutes. The quantum displacement drives that Lieutenant Jamin had warned about were performing exactly as predicted. Barely functional and prone to catastrophic failure. Fighter 7 is down. Drive failed during jump. Fighter 15 reporting critical power fluctuation. The communication cut off as Fighter 15 simply ceased to exist, torn apart by its own malfunctioning technology. All remaining fighters, disable automatic safety protocols, Yun-Seo commanded, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. Manual control only. If the drives are going to kill us, let us at least make it count. Her squadron acknowledged and dove deeper into the Vrelnith formation. The quantum drives, pushed beyond their safety limits by desperate pilots, began performing maneuvers that should not be physically possible. Ships flickered in and out of normal space, appearing behind enemy vessels for quick attacks before vanishing again. A Vrelnith capital ship lined up a killing shot at Yun-Seo's fighter. She manually triggered the quantum drive with zero safety margin, and felt reality twist around her in a way that made her stomach lurch. When normal space came back, she was inside the enemy ship's shield less than 50 meters from its hull. This is Fighter Lead, firing all torpedoes at point-blank range. It has been an honor. She launched every weapon she had and triggered the drive again. The mathematics said she had a 15% chance of surviving the jump so close to her own explosions. The mathematics were wrong. Yun-Seo appeared 3 kilometers away, her fighter damaged but still flying, just in time to see the Vrelnith capital ship tear itself apart from inside. Fighter Lead, how are you still alive? Her wing commander asked in shock. Stubbornness and good luck, Yun-Seo replied, checking her ammunition. Also, I think I am too angry to die today. Reforming squadron. We are not finished yet. On New Busan, Lieutenant Sojin watched her quantum communication network operate at 97% efficiency. She knew that remaining 3% was going to kill people. Every few minutes, another fleet group would experience communication delay, a missed order, a failed coordination. 3% was the difference between perfect and disaster. Fleet Group 12 is out of sync by 22 seconds, Technician Hyunwoo reported. They are requesting orders, but our signals are experiencing interference. Boost the signal through relay stations 7 and 14, Sojin ordered. And hope the amplification does not collapse the entire network. That is a 40% chance of total network failure, Hyunwoo warned. Better than a 100% chance of Fleet Group 12 flying blind, Sojin said. Do it. The boost worked. Fleet Group 12 received their orders and adjusted course with 19 seconds to spare, but Relay Station 7 overloaded from the strain, destroying communication coverage for 2 other fleet groups. Sojin made the hardest decision of her life. Route around Station 7. Groups 4 and 9 will have to operate independently for the next 18 minutes. They will be isolated in enemy territory with no coordination, Hyunwoo said quietly. I know. Sojin's hand shook as she input the commands. But maybe losing them is better than definitely losing everyone. Hope is not pretty. Sometimes it means choosing which disaster you can survive. This was the reality of Operation Wildfire that Commander Tae Yang had understood from the beginning. Hope as a strategy meant accepting losses that seemed unacceptable. It meant betting everything on the chance that desperate innovation and human stubbornness would somehow be enough. Aboard the Indomitable, Chief Engineer Bora watched her power systems operate at 200% capacity. That was well beyond the 140% that Lieutenant Jae-min had said was the absolute maximum. Core temperature is critical, her assistant Do-Yun warned. We need to reduce power or we will have a containment breach. Cannot reduce power. The shield generators are the only thing keeping us alive, Bora replied, running calculations at lightning speed. We need to vent heat differently. Route coolant through the secondary hull systems. Those are not designed for that kind of thermal load. The hull plating will start to melt. Then we will have melted hull plating, Bora said flatly, but we will be alive to complain about it. Do it. The improvised cooling system worked for 7 minutes. Then the heat exchanger for Section 12 suffered catastrophic failure, venting superheated plasma into a maintenance corridor. 4 technicians died instantly. Bora received the casualty report and closed her eyes for one moment of grief. Then she opened them and kept working because stopping meant everyone else died too. Hope had a terrible price and someone had to pay it. 14 hours into Operation Wildfire, the human fleet had suffered 34% casualties. That was higher than projected. The Vrelnith had destroyed 47 capital ships, 129 destroyers, and countless fighters. Thousands of humans were dead or dying in the cold vacuum of space, and yet impossibly the operation was succeeding. Of the 400 target hive clusters, humanity had successfully neutralized 73. The Vrelnith swarm, which had expanded without resistance for 14 years, was experiencing something new. For the first time, they faced prey that refused to accept being consumed. Commander Taeyang received updates from across the battlefield. Each one was a mixture of triumph and tragedy. Fleet Group 7 had lost half its ships but destroyed their target. Captain Yun Seo's squadron was down to 8 fighters but had crippled 3 Vrelnith capital ships. Lieutenant So Jin's communication network was degrading, but still functional. Chief Engineer Bora's power systems were failing, but had not failed yet. Everywhere, humans were doing the impossible by refusing to accept that it was impossible. In the Galactic Council chambers, High Arbitrator Kelmoth watched the battle unfold. The translators struggled to interpret what the crystalline being was feeling. It might have been awe. It might have been horror. Or perhaps it was respect for a species that had looked at mathematics predicting failure and responded with determination anyway. The breaking point was approaching. The moment when Operation Wildfire would either collapse into total defeat or surge toward impossible victory. And every human in the fleet knew it. They had turned hope into a weapon. Now they had to prove it could win wars. The next hours would determine if humanity's strategy was brilliant or foolish, if hope was truly a weapon or just a beautiful lie they told themselves before dying. But even if they failed, they would fail fighting. They would fail trying. They would fail proving that sometimes, just sometimes, the attempt itself was worth making. That was the human way. That was what hope meant to them. Not the belief that you would win, but the refusal to stop trying. Hour 18 of Operation Wildfire brought the moment that probability computers had calculated as inevitable. Complete tactical collapse. Fleet Group 3 had sustained 67% casualties and was falling apart. Commander Sang-woo made the only logical decision. He ordered his remaining ships to retreat from Hive Cluster Omega-4. The withdrawal was orderly and professional, exactly what military doctrine demanded when facing overwhelming opposition. It was also about to doom the entire operation. If Fleet Group 3 retreated, it would create a gap in the synchronized assault. The Vrelnith would redirect forces through that gap and collapse the entire offensive like falling dominoes. Commander Taeyang received the alert on the bridge of the CSS Defiant. He immediately opened a communication channel. Fleet Group 3, this is Command. Acknowledge retreat order. Command, this is Fleet Group 3 Actual, Commander Sang-woo responding. The voice sounded exhausted and haunted. We are combat ineffective. Remaining ships cannot hold position. Request permission to withdraw. Permission denied, Taeyang said. Fleet Group 3 will maintain position. Silence filled the communication channel. Then Sang-woo spoke again, his voice carefully controlled. Commander, with respect, we are out of ammunition. Shields are at 12%. We have fires on multiple decks. Maintaining position means we are just targets waiting to be destroyed. I know, Taeyang replied quietly. I am ordering you to die, Commander Sang-woo, and I need you to do it anyway. The silence stretched longer this time. Taeyang continued, his voice heavy. If you withdraw now, the gap in our formation allows Vrelnith reinforcements to collapse our entire eastern front. 17,000 personnel across 6 fleet groups will be surrounded and destroyed. But if you hold for just 12 more minutes, Fleet Group 17 will complete their strike and move to support your position. 12 minutes. Sang-woo repeated slowly. You are asking me to sacrifice what remains of my fleet for 12 minutes? Yes, I am asking exactly that. Another long pause. Then Sang-woo's voice returned, carrying something beyond exhaustion, a grim determination that was purely human. You know what the Council would say about this decision, Commander? They would say hope is not a strategy. And what do you say, Commander Sang-woo? I say we have not come this far to quit now. Fleet Group 3 will hold position. But Command? You tell Fleet Group 17 they have 11 minutes, not 12. We are going to start counting early. Understood. Hold the line, Commander. What you are doing matters. Hope it does. Fleet Group 3 out. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. Fleet Group 3, reduced to 19 ships operating on failing systems, transformed from a conventional military force into something the galaxy had never seen, a delaying action powered by pure spite. Commander Sang-woo ordered his ships to form a wall between the Vrelnith and the gap they were trying to exploit. The ships stopped maneuvering entirely and simply parked themselves in the enemy's path. Then they started broadcasting a message. This is Commander Sang-woo of Fleet Group 3 to all Vrelnith forces. You want through? Come and take it. The Vrelnith came. They fired everything at the stationary human ships. And Fleet Group 3 fired back, standing perfectly still as their shields failed and their hulls breached and their crews died at their stations. The cruiser Endurance lost all main power but continued firing with emergency batteries. The destroyer Valiant suffered a reactor breach but stayed in formation, its captain transmitting targeting calculations to help other ships even as his vessel tore itself apart. The frigate Last Laugh exhausted all ammunition and, with nothing left to lose, rammed a Vrelnith capital ship at full speed. 10 minutes in, Fleet Group 3 was down to 7 ships, all critically damaged. 11 minutes in, 3 ships remained functional. At 11 minutes and 43 seconds, Fleet Group 17 arrived. They unleashed everything they had on the Vrelnith forces that had been focused entirely on destroying the human wall. The Vrelnith never saw it coming. Commander Sang-woo survived, pulled from the wreckage of his bridge by rescue crews who found him still transmitting targeting data, even as life support failed around him. His last words before losing consciousness were, "Told command we would hold for 11 minutes. Made it to 12. Hope that counted." Across the 400-system battlespace, similar acts of desperate courage were rewriting what the Council thought was possible. Captain Yoon Seo's fighter squadron, reduced to 4 craft, discovered that their malfunctioning quantum drives could be weaponized, deliberately failing the drives while next to Vrelnith ships created dimensional rifts that shredded enemy hulls. This is fighter lead. We have 4 drives that are about to fail anyway. Might as well make it count. All fighters target the Vrelnith command carrier. Quantum ram on my mark. Captain, that is suicide, her wingman protested. It is a guarantee, Yoon Seo corrected. We die doing nothing or we die taking that carrier with us. I know which one I prefer. 3 fighters made their runs, deliberately triggering quantum drive failures at point-blank range. The dimensional disruptions tore through the Vrelnith carrier like tissue paper. The 4th fighter, Yoon Seo's, had a drive that stubbornly refused to fail when she wanted it to. Of course, she muttered. The one time I want this thing to break, it works perfectly. She turned away from the dying carrier and transmitted to the fleet. Fighter lead to all squadrons. Quantum drives fail catastrophically near enemy shields. I am listing it as a feature in my report. Use it. Within an hour, dozens of damaged fighters across the fleet were making terminal approach runs, a polite term for deliberate quantum drive failures used as improvised weapons. The tactic had a 70% fatality rate for pilots. Every squadron had volunteers lining up to try it. On New Busan, Lieutenant Sojin's quantum communication network was down to 73% efficiency and dropping. She had been awake for 36 hours straight, routing around failures and watching the infrastructure she built slowly degrade. We are losing coherence, Technician Hyunwoo reported. At this rate, we will have total network collapse in 4 hours. Then we have 4 hours to win, Sojin replied. How many relay stations can we overclock beyond safety limits? Without destroying them? Not with destroying them? All of them. Do it. Burn out every relay station if that is what it takes to keep the network functional, until Operation Wildfire completes. We will rebuild later, if there is a later. The quantum relay stations began operating at levels their designers had labeled theoretically impossible. Sojin watched 17 stations burn out in succession, each one maintaining communication for precious extra minutes before collapsing. By sacrificing the long-term infrastructure, she bought short-term functionality. Hope was not just believing in victory. It was being willing to burn everything you had to make that victory possible. Chief Engineer Bo-Ra had moved beyond normal engineering into what she called aggressive reinterpretation of physics. The Indomitable's power systems were operating at 340% capacity, a number that was not just dangerous, but should not be physically achievable. We are venting plasma directly into space to manage heat, her assistant Do-yeon reported, sounding slightly hysterical. We are using the hull as a heat sink. We are routing power through systems not designed to carry power. We have created 17 entirely new failure modes that do not have names yet. And we are still flying, Bo-Ra said with fierce pride. The Council's engineers would say this is impossible. It is impossible. Then we are doing the impossible, Bo-Ra grinned. Add it to humanity's list of accomplishments. Right between survive the Ice Age and colonize space with primitive rockets. At hour 23 of Operation Wildfire, the tide turned. The Vrelnith swarm, having expanded unopposed for 14 years, encountered something their intelligence could not process. An enemy that became more dangerous when losing. Every destroyed human ship disabled at least one Vrelnith vessel. Every failed experimental technology created new tactical options. Every act of desperate courage bought time for another fleet group to complete objectives. The probability computers had predicted human collapse at hour 18. At hour 23, humanity had neutralized 287 of 400 target hive clusters and was still fighting. High Arbitrator Kelmoth sent a transmission to Commander Tae Yang. Commander, the Council has been observing. We calculated your casualties would reach unsustainable levels at hour 18. You are now at hour 23 with 41% total casualties. By any rational measure, your fleet should have collapsed. But we did not, Tae Yang replied simply. No, you did not. We have been analyzing your tactics. They violate standard military doctrine in 237 distinct ways, and yet it is working. Hope works, High Arbitrator, when you weaponize it properly. This is not hope. This is systematic conversion of desperation into tactical advantage. This is organized defiance of probability. We call it fighting like humanity, Tai Yang said, and we are not finished yet. They had proven hope was a weapon. Now they would prove it could win wars. Hour 38 of Operation Wildfire brought something unexpected. A transmission from the Vrelnith swarm. For 14 years, the swarm had communicated nothing except targeting coordinates and expansion patterns. They were considered non-sentient, operating purely on hive instinct. The message was brief. The Council's translation systems rendered it as, "Human explain." Commander Tae Yang stared at the communication display on the bridge of the Defiant. The ship was held together by emergency patches and what Chief Engineer Bora called aggressive optimism. Around him, his crew looked hollow-eyed from exhaustion, but their determination had not wavered. "They are talking to us," Captain Yunseo said in disbelief. Her image flickered on the view screen from her damaged fighter. "In 14 years, they have never talked to anyone." "Respond," Tae Yang ordered. "Tell them we are humanity. We do not quit." The response from the Vrelnith came faster this time. Probability matrix error. Human fleet should cease function. Human fleet continues function. Explain error. Admiral Kyung-soo, commanding what remained of Fleet Group 7 from his backup bridge, laughed. The sound carried equal parts exhaustion and satisfaction. They think we are a math problem they cannot solve. They do not understand that we are not following their rules. Taeyang considered his response carefully. 14 years of war, hundreds of species destroyed, and now the Vrelnith swarm was trying to understand why their prey would not stay dead. "Transmit this," he told his communications officer. "You calculated we would lose. But you forgot to calculate that we would not accept losing. That is not an error. That is humanity." The Vrelnith response came quickly. "Acceptance of defeat increases survival probability. Continued resistance decreases survival probability. Human strategy is optimal for extinction." "And yet," Tae Yang replied, "we are still here. Maybe your probability calculations are missing something." What followed was the strangest negotiation in galactic history. The Vrelnith swarm began attempting to understand human decision-making, and they discovered something their hive intelligence had never encountered, a species that rewrote the rules of survival itself. Human sacrifice resources for zero probability gain. Fleet Group 3 maintained position at 100% casualty certainty. Explain optimization. It was not about optimization, Tai Yang explained. Fleet Group 3 held the line so others could survive. They chose certain death for themselves to give uncertain survival to their comrades. You cannot calculate that with probability. Inefficient, illogical. "No," Captain Yunseo interrupted. "It is hope. It is the bet that our sacrifice matters. That our deaths buy someone else a chance. You calculate survival of individual units. We calculate survival of the whole even if individuals do not make it." The Vrelnith swarm went silent for 17 minutes. Long-range sensors showed Vrelnith forces across hundreds of systems pausing their attacks, as if the entire swarm was processing this new information simultaneously. The next response contained something the translators struggled to interpret. "Human strategy creates net positive outcome from negative probability. This should not be possible." Query: how to replicate human strategy? They are trying to learn hope, Lieutenant Sojin whispered from her station on New Busan. They are trying to weaponize it like we did. But Commander Sang-woo, recovered from his injuries and listening from medical bay, understood the critical difference. They cannot. Because hope is not just refusing to quit, it is believing that your refusal matters. They are a hive mind. They do not have individuals who can choose sacrifice. They cannot hope because they cannot believe in anything beyond their calculations. Taeyang seized on this insight. Vrelnith swarm. You want to understand our strategy? Here it is. Every human in this fleet chose to be here, chose to risk death, chose to hope that their individual action might change the outcome. You cannot replicate that because you do not choose. You only calculate. Choice is inefficient. Choice is human, Yunseo countered. And choice is why you are losing. The final phase of Operation Wildfire began not with violent assault, but with cascading collapse of Vrelnith cohesion. The swarm, confronted with an enemy that operated on principles it could not process, began making errors. Small at first, but compounding rapidly. The hive intelligence that had conquered hundreds of systems through pure mathematical optimization discovered that human unpredictability was its perfect counter. Every time the swarm calculated optimal response to human tactics, humans changed tactics. Every time the swarm adapted to human weapons, humans invented new ones. Every time the swarm predicted human collapse, humans got more determined. Fleet Group 17, reinforced and rearmed, pushed through to Hive Cluster Prime, the central nexus of Vrelnith coordination. The cluster's defenses had been calculated as impenetrable, requiring firepower that would demand 90% of the entire galactic fleet. Chief Engineer Bo-Ra looked at those calculations and said, "Math is for people who gave up." Then she and her counterparts across the human fleet synchronized the power cores of 47 ships into a single massive directed energy pulse. The Tao technique had a name in the project files, the Desperation Beam. It had a 65% chance of destroying the ships that generated it, and a 100% chance of destroying whatever it hit. All ships synchronize on my mark, Bo-Ra transmitted. Core overload in 3, 2, 1 mark. 47 human ships channeled every bit of power they had, including life support, shields, and engines, into a single synchronized energy discharge. The beam that resulted violated several laws of physics. Hive Cluster Prime lasted approximately 2 seconds before its entire structure vaporized. 32 of the 47 ships that fired the Desperation Beam survived the discharge. The crews of the 15 ships that did not survive died watching their impossible weapon work exactly as hoped. With Hive Cluster Prime destroyed, the Vrelnith swarm began fracturing. Secondary hives attempted to coordinate independently, but lacked the capacity to manage the collective intelligence that had made them unstoppable. They became merely dangerous instead of existential. The Galactic Council watched the impossible unfold. Operation Wildfire, given a 0.003% success probability, had not just succeeded, it had revolutionized galactic warfare by proving that determination and hope could overcome mathematical certainty. High Arbitrator Kelmoth's crystalline form pulsed with confused colors. Commander Taeyang, the Council requires explanation. Operation Wildfire succeeded with 47% final casualties across 400 engagements. Our probability matrices calculated 99.7% casualty rates. The discrepancy is unprecedented. The discrepancy, Taeyang replied, his voice hoarse from 38 hours of command, is that your matrices calculated what should happen. Humans calculate what we will make happen. There is a difference. You cannot simply refuse probability. We just did. We have been doing it for our entire history. Every time mathematics said we would go extinct, we invented new mathematics. Counselor Hei-Wan stood before the assembled council with quiet dignity. For 200,000 years, my species has survived by refusing to accept that survival was impossible. We walked out of Africa when we should have starved. We survived ice ages. We split the atom, left our planet, and built civilization across the stars. Every single time, probability said we would not make it. She gestured to the displays showing the battered but victorious human fleet. And every single time we made hope our strategy. Not passive hope. Active, aggressive, engineered hope. Hope backed by ingenuity, sacrifice, and stubborn refusal to quit. This changes everything, Kelmoth said slowly. If hope can be systematically implemented as strategy, Then you might want to start hoping, Taeyang finished. Because the galaxy is going to need it. The aftermath rippled across galactic civilization. The Council's 7 species began studying human tactics with intense focus. The concept seemed simple. Refuse to surrender. Innovate under pressure. Sacrifice tactically. Fight with absolute determination. But they proved nearly impossible for other species to replicate. Only humans, it seemed, had spent their entire evolutionary history practicing hope as survival strategy. The Vrelnath swarm, fractured and confused, retreated to their home clusters. Their hive intelligence continued trying to process how probability could be defied. They would never fully understand. Understanding required the ability to hope. 3 months after Operation Wildfire, a memorial was dedicated on New Busan. It listed every name. All 14,733 personnel who died, proving that hope was a weapon. Commander Sang-woo attended, walking with a cane. Captain Yunseo was there, decorated for valor and refusing to retire despite having died and been resuscitated 4 times. Chief Engineer Bora brought a piece of melted hull plating and mounted it beside the memorial with a plaque reading, "Aggressive Optimism, Humanity's Greatest Engineering Achievement, Lieutenant." Sojin coordinated the ceremony's communications using a rebuilt network operating at 99.7% efficiency. She named the new relay stations after the ones that had burned out during battle, ensuring their sacrifice was remembered. Commander Taeyang stood before the memorial and spoke. "They told us hope was not a strategy. They showed us mathematics that proved we would lose. They calculated our extinction with absolute certainty." He paused, looking at the names. "And we said, watch us anyway. Hope is not passive. It is not wishful thinking. Hope is looking at impossible odds and deciding they are just math that has not met human determination yet." The galaxy learned something. They learned that humanity does not fight wars the way probability predicts. We fight the way hope demands, absolutely, creatively, and with stubborn refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible. He saluted the memorial. Behind him, every survivor followed suit. "They claimed hope was not a strategy," Taeyang concluded. "We made it one, and we will keep making it one, every time the galaxy tells us something cannot be done." In the council chambers, High Arbitrator Kelmoth finally understood. Hope was not about denying reality. It was about refusing to let reality be the final word. The Galactic Council officially adopted a new strategic doctrine. It was brief, written in 37 languages, based entirely on human philosophy. When probability calculates defeat, implement hope protocol. Define impossible as not yet achieved. Calculate survival as mandatory, not probable. Refuse extinction with absolute determination. At the bottom was a note, "Doctrine developed by humanity. Warning, implementation requires willingness to sacrifice certainty for possibility." Humanity had changed the galaxy not by being stronger or smarter, but by being too stubborn to quit and too hopeful to accept defeat as inevitable. They had made hope a weapon, and the galaxy would never be the same.